Roger, I'd give you a big introduction, but that just cuts into your time, so we'll turn it over to Roger.
Oh, thank you. No, this is, I'm feeling, last night, trouble sleeping. I don't know if that was the Bears game today or having to do this. But I'm very, very humbled and grateful to be up here doing this. About 7 years ago, I transitioned from being in public accounting for 10 years as a consultant into business development in kind of the high-level staffing agencies. And this kind of coincided with like the gig economy was kind of a buzzy term. And over those 7 years, it's kind of molded, and you'll see that statistics are kind of all over the board, but there's good trends that it is a growing, very powerful segment. And watching and meeting and talking to you guys, I've surveyed, I think some of you may have even taken a survey I put out in 2017 to help understand what motivates you guys. There's just not a ton of research out there, so this is a very humbling and a grateful opportunity for me. So I'm gonna do a little, let's see if this works. There we go. So a quick summary. So kind of going to give you a very high level overview of the gig economy. When you hear that term, what does it imply? I've kind of niched out a term. There's just a lot of inconsistent language, or when people talk about gig, most people immediately think of Uber, like the guy that almost cut me off coming out of the air turnaround. Pros and cons of gig life, that's where the survey I did, combined with a lot of research I've done on the topic. And then kind of a high-level roadmap and some key points. If you choose to kind of enter, or some people are already doing this, other ways to maximize your opportunity in what I term the pro-gig space. So without further ado, the overview. So the gig economy, I went to the government because they know everything. The Bureau of Labor Statistics defines a gig as a single project or task for which a worker is hired, often through a digital marketplace, to work on demand. And then they kind of elaborate further about being a contingent or alternative work arrangements. And the bottom line there is kind of important, the implicit or explicit contract for long-term employment. And I've kind of put some things down here that touch on a variety of things. You know, Grubhub gets you your Jimmy John's faster, Uber takes you from here to there. I've used Dolly, it's really handy if you're getting rid of old furniture. They'll come over with a van. It's like Uber for moving things around. It's been really nice. And then, you know, those are more service-based. And when you get into the higher level, what you guys do, Haro's a Chicago-based company. It's kind of on the front end. It's new. It's innovating. They're definitely, I don't know what series they're in, but they're growing and trying to innovate in this space. Upwork is more online marketplace for marketing, IT, coding, those types of things. TopTal, ShiftGig is more, you know, Carlucci's might use ShiftGig if they are having a huge event like this and they need to bring in talent quickly. There are a lot of platforms out there that are, you know, clearing the supply and demand for labor within the gig economy. So again, traditional gig economy is really, you know, going back the last 7 years or so, when I started researching it, it was thinking of the Ubers. Some people throw Airbnb in there. eBay is even considered part of the gig economy. So it's really just, you know, what you're reading, you may get different interpretations, but really it's about, you know, it's all about making side money. People weren't really doing it for a full-time gig, and a lot of the media things you see on the TV, what you're reading in papers, is really focused on kind of the lower skill. No offense to people doing this, because you know, PhDs are driving for Uber, but the skill of the job itself, in you know, task-driven services, that's where a lot of media attention is. The good part is there are organizations that are starting to dig deeper into independent work, into, you know, what motivates higher level professionals, things like that. So when you do have, you know, you start reading a lot of articles about this, you're going to see tons of different terms: freelancer, temp, contingent, independent contractor, loan staff, interim, on demand. I got a guy, you know, that does that work. So, you know, as you research and read more and listen more about the gig economy, all these kind of, you know, I think about like Uber and taxi drivers. And back in the day, a taxi driver was like, oh, you're a taxi driver. But now, like, you see these commercials for Uber, and it's like the most, you know, wonderful looking thing, and they've really put a shine on it. And I think these are kind of old terms like taxi driver, and where maybe there was a little negative view of always a temp. No, this is evolving as well into that temp is going to come here and help us from a finance and accounting perspective, close our books faster. We're selling our company, we're putting in a system. It's a very general term to describe some very specific things. So with these different terms, it does make it challenging to pull research in and really hone in on different segments of the market. So just thought I'd point that out. So here we go. How big is this gig economy we speak of? It depends, which is always a good answer. Who you ask? So here, you can read through these, but it ranges from, depending on the definition, 41 million to 57 million. Freelancers Union is a great site that helps a lot of freelancers tackle things like, where do I go for insurance? How do I collect faster? And freelancers, that term tends to be used with more shorter term. I'm doing freelance work, but I'm a graphic designer by day at Edelman or whatever, and I'm doing freelancing on the side. Traditionally that term's been used. Bureau of Labor Statistics, obviously, this is the monster. Even they struggle, and they won't even do a yearly report. It comes in chunks, and they're constantly redefining terms, so it's a little tough. I really enjoy MBO partners. I've listed all these references in the back, and I'll share this with all you guys if you want to dig into some of the data further. But they've been doing studies. I think this is their 9th year, could be longer, doing studies of independent workforce. And this is, it dives deep into who are the high earners, what motivates you, things like that, where it's less so about, task driven, are the Uber drivers underpaid in New York City versus LA or whatever it is. It's very, I think the best information out there, in my humble opinion. But overall, it's a big force, and it's only growing. So this is from a McKinsey study from 2016. The numbers are, I know we're in accounting, finance world, these numbers aren't going to reconcile. That's because this graphic includes Europe, but in the US, this is their extrapolation. The study is 54 to 68 million independent earners. But this is really interesting because I meet lots of you guys, I know you guys, some people are doing this, or kind of like the out of necessity, being in transition, reluctant to be in the gig economy. Others are full force. This is it. I love this. I'm going to do this for a career. I don't really bump into the supplemental income on a professional level in my day job, but we do run into these where people, just have a side hustle and they want to. They're doing it by choice, but it's supplemental to their income, maybe to pay for their golf membership, which continues to grow at every golf course ever. And then the financially strapped. But just thinking about your motivation for doing this, I tend to play in that primary income preferred choice. I'm trying to find folks that align with that, and I hunt for them in my day job. But bump into those two buckets on the left. I think it's an interesting dynamic because there's a lot of reluctance that I think could thrive in the professional gig economy, just with some, dipping the toe in a little water, a little more in commitment. So that's an interesting segmentation. So this MBO State of Independence, this just came out recently. More people are choosing full-time gig work. I think there's a lot that goes into that. As you see, the number grew pretty dramatically over those 6 years or 7 years that they've been doing it. And some interesting things, just to boil it down quickly, their reluctance, it's going down as well. Last year was a very interesting time with the economy picking up. A lot of people are getting the full-time offer. Of the full-time independents, a tremendous amount of the reluctance are now back in the workforce. I think of the full-time independents that went back full-time into full-time positions, traditional employment, 4 out of 5 of those were reluctance. And the balance were people that were like, I'm doing gig work, and then they got the offer. And I think didn't really dive into this, but just from personal experience, working with a lot of folks in the market, when we see companies that are going through tremendous change, that have the opportunity for people that are really built for gig work, if they can offer them that opportunity to build and fix things internally, it makes sense to go full time. Or a private equity firm maybe holding, they're coming to the end of their holding period and they just want to bring them on full time, things like that. I still think the underlying motivation for gig workers is like you can't put out that flame, and over time you will circle back into the world. But this is an interesting nugget. The other one is more people are making over $100,000 annually. They call them high earners in the MBO studies, which is really kind of a focus of my trying to pin down how big is, within the huge gig economy, talking to more experienced finance, accounting professionals, nurses, lawyers, people, I'll dig into this a little deeper. It's a kind of mid-late career where you have experience, credentials, etc. There are very different things that go into business development, the components of a gig life versus folks that are kind of in the earlier stage of their career. And I think as generation shifts are happening and people are retiring, which is a loaded term nowadays, I think more people are open to it, and you guys have tremendous value to give. And that's where I think this number of high earners is going to continue to grow over time. But just some directional statistics there. So how big will it be? And these predictions are all over the board as well. If half the workforce is going to be working freelance by 2027. We got, these numbers are kind of, just depends on how they define it, but 60 million people, 53% of their workforce. These are all, directionally, I think it has to do with a lot of the acceptance of gig work is becoming more, just more status quo. People aren't as afraid of it. People are seeing the value of it. Companies especially are seeing ways that they can engage folks on an ad hoc basis to help them with certain projects. Technology innovation is a big thing. It's kind of it depends on the technology, what it's trying to do, and the folks that are leveraging that technology. But long story short, I think the gig economy is going to continue to grow, continue to have acceptance. It'll become more familiar over time, and I think it has a lot to do with this. These two things. So technology, many digital platforms are popping up, and I just think of this as supply and demand of labor. Uber took advantage that there was excess supply of seats driving around, and there's the demand for those butts to be in those seats. There's the same thing with using shift gig as that example. There's a lot of open, events going on at places that can't bring in people quick enough, and they want to bring in 30, 40 people for 2 nights to help her. With the NFL, I wouldn't be surprised if that NFL kickoff party is leveraging shift gig to help fill bodies for that particular thing. So I think, success varies by industry, using that as an example. Another thing which is interesting to watch, and you guys may see this if you're invested in Uber or Lyft, is they continue to lose boatloads of money. 1.3 billion in Q2 for Uber, 867 million for Lyft, and they are chasing market share. They are just trying to gobble it up as much as they can. Here's $20, come ride in my car, and then you're hooked. It's a lower level of trust to use a service that you've been using all the time. When I read about the Uber and Lyft, I don't know the financial fundamentals of the companies themselves. I do read into that it feels like a race to the bottom, which can't be good for financials over time. So we'll see how that all plays out. But then, when you think about an Lyft and an Uber, and then you think about an Upwork and more higher level, I think the conversation changes. So it's just interesting things to kind of think about. The consolidation thing is pretty interesting. There's definitely strategic buyers out there. There's also platform consolidation. I'm sure Fieldglass is a Chicago company bought by SAP. If you guys haven't used it as a consultant or as as a buyer, it helps the companies better manage their contingent spend and on really anything. It creates it's depending on the company. I think it can be a good thing or might create more challenges than it's worth. But SAP saw the value and dumping a lot of money in that acquisition. I believe it's a successful, it's been successful for them. But I think that's more from the company perspective. Odesk, this doesn't really apply to this world as much, but Odesk, these two companies, Odesk and Elance, they combine to become Upwork. So when you read historical gigs, things you may reference Elance, Upwork, and they're focused on, it's really a digital marketplace for graphic designers, computer coding, etc. But you'll see that kind of aggregation. We're doing the same thing. One of us is going to win. Why don't we both win together? And they come together. Randstad being a huge, they probably are the biggest staffing firm in the world. They bought a company in Europe called Twago, which was the online digital marketplace for this kind of tech spend. So even staffing firms are looking, especially the publicly traded ones that have to perform and have that growth, they're looking for ways to dive into this quicker, which is interesting to watch. So a lot of moving parts going on in kind of the tech side. The company side is also super interesting, especially the big companies that I think have been a little reluctant to dive in. They tended to hire heavy and leverage their internal resources for project work. Now they're recognizing, we don't need this particular component of our organization to be on site. You may, think of it, it's not as extreme as offshoring AP over to India or China, but it could be something as simple as, outsourcing our design function. We're trying to innovate on this project. We need somebody that's really good at pricing for this new entity. We're going to just bring them in instead of hiring them full time. So companies are starting to really break down the internal capabilities and readiness for this future of work is a term that you may see out there. I think that is interesting. I do think big companies move slow, so we'll see how quickly that happens. But they're implementing these softwares to manage contingent labor, like a Fieldglass, and a lot of it comes down to mitigating risk and trying to be in the position to maximize their value. So when you're reading studies by Mercer, they're obviously positioning, or Fieldglass, or Accenture, they're positioning their white paper to talk about these topics, and then, oh yeah, we can help with that. We have this tool, or it's less. Which I should have kind of said this more in the beginning. As I've started to read a lot of this stuff, there is not a really strong voice for workers, the gig workers themselves. You'll see this manifest in articles that feel almost like a throwback to like Carnegie when he was just taking advantage of all his workers, and then they unionized, and then they had some power and they pushed back. You kind of get that sense when you read about Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, minimum wage laws, all this stuff. Their skill doesn't necessarily, the skill set for that job doesn't necessarily give them much bargaining position, so they need to kind of aggregate their bargaining power and go on a strike during the Super Bowl or whatever it may be. Whereas if you are a very seasoned tax person and you are going into the gig economy, I can tell you right now, you're going to get a lot of phone calls from staffing agencies, and you're going to have a lot of companies, if you're networking, that are going to want you, and you're not going to have an issue negotiating rate. It's just a very different niche. So, I think there's an opportunity. I'm trying to be somewhat of a guy carrying the flag to shift some of the conversation to, what about the workers? How can they be better educated with the tools that it takes to be successful in the market? So it's definitely, there's an overload right now. The companies are investing. There's not as much out there from on the personal level, which hopefully changes. Hopefully I can have some say in that if I keep screaming loud enough. This is a view inside my brain. I was trying to figure out how to kind of lay things out. Combining this, so like back to the skill supply, barrier to entry, and the user trust hurdle, user being, you or me or a company, trying to kind of spread out to show you the lower skill, Grubhub, you could, if you're in New York City, you could work for 4 restaurants on your block and only deliver within 3 blocks and just walk around with a backpack delivering things. Very low, barrier to entry. Uber, same thing with all cars. We could probably all sign up in an hour, I bet, nowadays. As you kind of move into, so back to that segment, when you're reading a lot of articles, when they talk about like, oh, it's, you know, horrible conditions on negotiating rate, and you move up into where there's a very high user trust hurdle, and the skill set is very, you know, important. If you're an in-home nurse that's following up on, you know, a massive surgery, like you need to be certified, you need to know what you're doing. The rate is just not even an issue. Whereas if you think about business development, the Uber driver can get their next gig like that. You know, guys, there are people in this room that I've been talking to for a very long time, and we've gone back and forth. It's going to work. It's going to work. It's not going to work. And it just becomes, it's a harder, it's, you know, I'll show it later, but it's a more concern to higher level. So when I'm reading and thinking through these things, I think, you know, thinking, you know, trying to kind of break apart, is this a very skilled work set? Is the user trust hurdle higher? I think over time, these things will shift around. As the technology evolves. I have a slide on later about earnings by generation, and the whole generational shift, I think, as you get more of the millennials and whatever the next one are working through the workforce, they just have a higher trust in technology, period, so they're going to think it works, versus, you know, people in the buying decision right now may not. That's why you don't see Paro on the exchange next to Uber. The acceptance isn't there yet. So just an interesting way to kind of balance when you see a gig company, like where they're at in their growth, or I don't know if any of you have the ability to invest, but I would be thinking about that if I was investing in any of these companies. So, let's see. So overall takeaways, the gig economy is growing for sure. Certain pockets more so than others. The companies in tech are investing heavily in the space. And looking for ways to win, obviously. And then, you know, back to if you guys are interested in the gig economy, start reading more, listening to podcasts, like really having an ear open to who is giving this, writing this article, who's on this podcast, what, you know, particular thing are they talking about. I think thinking about trying to whittle it down to the common, you know, threads, and then applying the thought of, is this applicable to me? Is it just something to have some self-awareness around? And the kind of lack of voice and advocates for gig workers, a quick takeaway from that. I know I just threw a lot at you, and it's early. Do you guys have any thoughts, questions right now? Yes?
Okay, I actually have two questions. So the first would be, do you notice any seasonality in the gig economy that is kind of a factor related to when hiring is strong for full-time positions? Like when, you know, they're in your peak, companies are in their peak full-time hiring for accounting and finance individuals outside of tax.
Yeah.
Do you tend to notice the gig economy opportunities drying up more? And then if they didn't find their people, boom, you get a surge. And then my second question is, I'm not sure if you have any information on how well the gig economy fared in 2008, but given that there's a lot of people are projecting that we'll be in a recession in 2020, and it's going to be kind of a different kind of a recession because there's more global components. How do you see that impacting the gig economy, or how has it historically impacted it? And do you see, if this does happen, it being a little different due to all the, you know, other components that this recession would encompass?
Yeah, okay, so on the seasonality, and I'll speak super hyper local. I live finance and accounting, project interim in this market, 7 years of it. I started well, not right after, but relatively close to that last one. So I can't speak personally, but for the seasonality part, there is seasonality, and as silly as it sounds, it tends to go around like holidays. For gig work, like August is always slow. 4th of July week slow. You know, this window we're heading into, September to Thanksgiving, it gets busy. Last year there was a lag. Usually it starts right after, you know, year-end people come back, now the budgets are back, and things go. So at a high level, I'd say yes, there is some seasonality for finance and accounting. You know, if you think through, like, UPS is probably hiring a crazy amount of packers for their Christmas season. So there, you know, things like that ebb and flow. I do think within even a function, so FP&A is a little hot right now. You get accounting gets a little hotter around the quarters. But overall, something that's kind of in the past, call it couple years, has kind of jammed everything up is private equity is going bananas. And they're buying and selling and people are moving and, oh man, we need to do pro forma. We might hold this for a year so we don't want to hire full time, so we're going to bring in a contractor. So there's just a lot of, it's hard to really pin that part down. I'll sit, and I'm going to throw this out there as a prediction, and I'm not, I don't know, confidence level on the prediction, but now that this is more evolved, and I think, and you guys may be able to answer this better, like when coming out of the last, there was, Harmer traditionally is known for search, which I'm now been there 3.5 years, so they've been doing this for 33 years, so I ask a lot of questions about that because I don't understand search, it's a different animal. But in 08, I think looking at a resume, it had to be very clean. Then 08 happened, and then everybody kind of got choppy. And now there's less of that like concern about you were employed this whole time. You must be good. I'll hire you. And I think to me, which reflects in the gig economy, it's shifting more towards, can you solve my problem today? And that's where the gig economy, I think, will thrive a little more, is because folks that are thriving in that gig economy know what they can solve. They're very good at saying what they can solve. They network well with those providers that have an ear of the CFO or whatever the department, and they're able to leverage that into opportunity. So, sorry, that was kind of a long-winded prediction, but I do think I'm nervous about it a little. I've never been through it, but I do think companies are gonna. Obviously, the cost thing becomes a variable, but I think the overall acceptance of gig workers is higher than it was in 08, and so I think comparatively it'll probably be better relatively speaking, but I don't think I can't say if it'll be. And
some companies might opt to go with gig workers over full-time workers.
Could be, yeah. Cost is a concern some of the time. Yes.
I was just saying, do you think there's any literature on that 2008 created the gig economy?
Oh, geez.
Or the professional gig economy. That's
I laughed a little bit, like internally I do. I was reading a book this summer about like the lumber industry back in like the 1800s or something like that, and they had these guys called jobbers, which were the lumber owner, whoever, the landowner hired the jobber to hire the workers, and they were effectively gig workers. I was like, oh man, this has been going on a long time. So, I think the term itself has kind of got a little hot, and I'm kind of riding that, fanciness of the term to focus conversation. But I think it was around, I think it was called you're a temp, you're interim, but it was kind of like, put the temp over there, or the interim guy. It wasn't a recognition of the value that you can bring to the job as a seasoned professional. So, yes.
So you mentioned borrow and then being on sort of the forefront of using the gig economy and terminology like that, using technology.
Yeah.
But essentially, do you consider them a competitor?
Well, yes. But not really. I don't bump into them. Yes, in theory, yes. But and I have friends that think they compete more with them, and they still don't feel like they compete with them.
So essentially, you're providing a similar solution, the problem that exists in the portal, and getting people there on a temporary basis, whatever it is. Do you think that what will happen with places like Paro, somebody be this giant one, because right now staffing's pretty fragmented.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe just in the future, if you're technically Armor and other firms, technology looks different, how the approach is different, or how do you think that sort of
No, I think I nerd out on this a lot because I'm a broker, and I saw the E-Trade movie, I'm screwed in the long term. I don't know if it'll happen in my career or not. I think back to that user trust. So I have a friend, he's this kind of small CPA firm, his own thing, and we went to coffee and he was like, oh my God, have you heard of this company? They're gonna eat my lunch, this is gonna be brutal. Then we played golf a summer later. I'm like, you still freaking out? He's like, actually, I ended up going and cleaning up out behind them a lot. Because I think in theory it's a great idea, but the optimization of it's still working itself out. So I don't know, I really don't know. My thesis, if I had to I sometimes joke, and I've probably said this to you guys, that I'm getting a doctorate in anthropology of staffing firms. Because there's so many, and they ebb and flow and buy and sell, and people move. I moved one, but I think it's an interesting space, and I think there isn't a lot of innovation. So when a paro happens, people are like, "Whoa, what's this?" I do think over time, you guys win, the consultants win. When the technology catches up, where you don't need a guy like me to go hunt for you, and you know how to do it, or there's a technology out there that has enough user trust where people can go there and have confidence that they're going to get great people. Right now, I think Paro, and there's nothing against these guys. Like, I think the guys Michael, I'm meeting with him in a few weeks just to talk about this because I want to understand. But the Top Tail does the same thing. We only work with the top 2%. Like, who decides that, and can I see your numbers on that, So I don't know, but for somebody that's, young and, I see them in tech startup land a lot, so you got the young entrepreneurs, sure, yeah, let's do that, sounds good, boom, let's try it, and they'll go try it just because they don't have a lot of reservations versus, what's here, like US Foods, like they might just be like, well, we got great relationships, we trust them, we'll wait. We'll take a pass. So sorry, that was a kind of a long-winded diatribe. But yes, I'll continue on here quickly. So again, big gig economy. Noticing inconsistent trends within the segment that I serve. So I kind of tried to dig in and define this professional gig segment. I wrote an article on this. It's on my LinkedIn to kind of get to this 5 million number using the MBO study, using some McKinsey studies. But in general, when you chunk down the more mid to late career professionals, 15 plus years, undergraduate degree or more, a lot of you guys have MBAs too, certified in their field. And I try not to, I know my swim in finance and accounting, but I meet lawyers that are doing this. A friend up in Minnesota has a marketing play in this space. So there's plenty of different fields that this applies to. At least $80,000 in the annual income, and the builder fixer mindset. I kind of added that last night just to give you a sense of, gig workers tend to love problems. Like if our phone rings and there's a fire, somebody quit, we just got bought, we're moving this operation somewhere else. We need people, and it's people that thrive in that environment where they're not necessarily afraid of that kind of extreme change that can happen. But would be the professional gig segment. This was in a Maven Link study. So biggest growth coming from senior management and the C-suite. 47% of executives state they are looking to hire contractors to fill management and senior executive roles. Their two most important criteria for contractors were specialized degrees and more than a decade experience. So, you're seeing more literature come out on this. Here's the generation slide I was mentioning. So this is from the most recent MBO study. They're full-time independents, they say work more than 15 hours a week, and these are averages. So you see the boomers, Gen X, millennials, their earning is, there's a nice upward trend to that, and that is solely because you guys know what you're doing when it comes, like Barrett is like SEC guy, he can roll in, and you're a lot more than that, I know you are. But when he comes in, he's not like looking for $15 an hour, he's got a skill set that companies need now, and they're gonna pay for it. Not in a bad way, like in a mutually agreeable way. So, earnings by generation, just pointing towards more experience, kind of veer towards that professional segment. So this is kind of just a high level thing. What is professional gig work? I've referenced Upwork. I don't know, this might be hard to read, it's a little small, but if you need someone to design a website, do a marketing campaign, in-home nursing, legal contract review, you may go through a digital marketplace to find these folks, and it might be short things. It might be an hour a week. It may be just a short project, like I just need this done in 1 week. The other stuff, which I swim in every day, are way more full-time nature and demanding. So it really, the way I think of it is you need somebody to embed in the company. These could be critical share gaps. I have a client that their tax director left, they're recently public, that's obviously a problem. So they need somebody there yesterday to come in and kind of, what I say, stabilize that role. Skill set gaps, so that usually project related. We're installing black line reconciliation tool, I need somebody that is a really good project manager and has done, understands reconciliations and can do this for 6 months because I don't want to hire somebody to do it. Deadline-driven demands, these can be the fun ones around month-end close. Oh, we filed our S1 and we're going public on this date and we realize we are way behind. We need more capacity, financial restatements, things like that. Within the, again, Harmer, this is where I work. I tend to play in these waters every day. So takeaways, professional segment is significant part of the gig economy, and I think it'll grow faster than a lot of the other segments. This is my humble belief. Again, companies are hiring the professional gig workers for their ability to solve a problem today. So when you think about positioning yourself, it's very much like, what problems do I solve? And at a very, as well defined as you can make that, and then how do I communicate that to clients? And then mid to late career professionals have more of this hands-on experience and they have the opportunity to monetize. So with this all said, as I was reading all this stuff, probably 2016, there wasn't a lot around the motivations of this segment. So I reached out to a bunch of, some of you may have filled out my survey, some other groups that I reached out to, but I kind of was asking, why do you do this? What are the top things? Rank order them. How long have you been doing this, etc. And the top pluses coming out of why people choose this are the variety of the work, the flexibility of the scheduling, and less politics. Those are top three. As more literature's come out over the last couple of years, you'll see variety and flexibility is top two in pretty much anything you read. Variety is pretty self-explanatory. You're seeing a lot of different companies, big, small. You may be doing some accounting one time, you might be doing some FP&A the next time, so it's more fresh. You're not doing the same thing every day. The flexibility is pretty, sometimes I laugh. I've had consultants be like, I've been working too long and I want to take the summer off to work on my golf game. And you can do that. Or I don't want to work, this is a fun one. I have multiple people that say this. I don't want to work outside of DuPage County. All right, cool. We'll call you when we have something, but probably, by defining that, maybe we won't be able to help. The negatives, this was, so business development, need to continuously network, the benefits, lack of traditional career progression. Number one was like off the charts. That's why people don't jump in. Where am I going to find my next gig? I'm not ready to do that. I can't take that on that risk. Benefits, kind of obviously a number two. And there's a lot out there about that. How do we tackle? You'll see, like the exchange has kind of shifted a lot for people. Now it's more expensive for everybody. But companies like we W-2 are contractors and they're eligible for our health plan. Firms are doing more like that. Yeah.
Is there any data on kind of almost like people that are full-time in the professional gig environment? Do they think there's better or worse life balance? I would imagine sometimes to hit the project you get brought in for that, you're engulfed in that project and you have no life, and then there's times where you work on your golf game or something.
True, and that I think like they get paid time and a half, so you make a lot of money in those projects, and it's usually work that they want to do. It's not like they got handed that one project they didn't want to do and they have to do it, and they're I've been doing close forever and I'm always working the weekends. It's so I think there's they tend to be more engaged and enjoy their career work-life balance a lot more. More and more, there are tools that are out there that are allowing people to work remote more often. So that also increases the ability to have better work-life balance. And one thing I mentioned, like in that guy, less politics. So this is like, you're there to do this. You don't care that, this person's trying to, become CFO or whatever. You're just there for your project. Yes, there's going to be project politics, but it's a different thing and projects end and move on. So I think, the work-life thing, I think that kind of taking more of the traditional politics off the table helps alleviate some of that kind of like a dread of going to work today kind of thing. So, any other questions on that? I'm going to drive through this quick and then we can have a question frenzy. So this is kind of like a very high level way to think about this. When I was in consulting, I had a health event and decided I needed to do something different. It made me think about like the things that I really enjoy doing in my work. You know, I may have been at a 20% fulfillment, and I did not want to be there. I wanted to get to a higher level. I see a similarity in gig work. It's really thinking about what are you passionate about? What work do you do that brings, you know, you just totally lose track of time and you're just in the zone for this type of work. So it takes a little self-reflection to get to this, but I think when you do, you realize what you want to broadcast out to the market in networking groups, on your LinkedIn, in your elevator pitch. It's a subtle shift. I think if you work with like career outplacement, you may have a traditional resume, chronological, and then you have your executive bio, which is very much like current heavy, and then a little bit of history. That idea of, you know, what can you do for me today is very important. So thinking through what are you passionate about, you know, what work brings you joy, fully engages you. And then the other part is where are you going to find this work? Back to the business development piece. I could talk for days on this. It's my day job. So, you know, finding your buyer, where do they hang out? How can I connect with them? Do you want to, after you do that, are there people like me that can hunt for you? Or do you need to, you know, are there digital marketplaces, things like that? Thinking through kind of what do I want to do? How am I going to get that workflow rolling? That's kind of a short-term fix. Longer term, I see a lot of consultants that want to do this and be their own single shingle over time. And, you know, I think leveraging intermediaries in the short term allows you to build up your portfolio, gain trust, build your brand in the market. So then as you continue to network, you can start relying less on an agency, digital marketplace to find those gig professional gigs out in the market. So, you know, back to quickly your passion. So these are just high level thought exercise. Do you prefer doing the day-to-day month-end close? Some people are awesome at it and that's all they want to do. And that's fantastic. Or were you the person that they always dumped a special project on and you disappeared into a hole for 2 years and just loved it? You know, what drives you? What is it that makes these projects interesting? I found a lot when I made a big career transition, I looked at my personal life more. I really preferred to have some creativity in my job. I worked at the time I was at Ernst & Young, big company, like creativity. And accounting is bad, but you know, creativity, trying to be innovative in a big company like that is very hard with layers and layers and layers and layers. So for me, that may open my eyes to way smaller companies and be able to be closer to that decision. Do you enjoy cleaning up messes? Or, you know, this is something I see that's interesting, the group versus solo. Some consultants thrive in a big group consulting environment, others just don't. We learn that along the way as we work together. But if you could having self-awareness and knowing that, like, hey, if I go in, I want to be the guy that like does all this. It may allow you to say no to certain projects and hold out for the right projects. But again, self-awareness of, you know, what are some themes back to the whole being fulfilled. The reason I have the radio tower on there, it's the analogy that I think of. It's when you're finding these things, like I am so passionate about FP&A, budgeting, and pricing. Like that is my sweet spot. I'm going to go all in on it. Retooling your entire frequency that you're broadcasting to the market. This is a higher level thinking, kind of law of attraction stuff, where you are putting this out there and you're saying no to anything doesn't fit this pocket. Over time, that wins. You're going to start getting these opportunities, and because you're so good at it and passionate, you're going to nail them. Those clients are going to be like, oh my God, like this is ridiculous, and they have friends over at other companies. They're going to pass your name over, and over time, this is what I think, you know, back to giving control, not giving control, but consultants win over time as they focus in, get niche-y. If somebody comes to me and says, oh, I just want to do a job, it's like, I don't know what to do. Like, what kind of job? You know, like we got, you know, this and that and this location. Somebody that comes in and is, you know, I am an expert on, you know, transfer pricing. Okay, we can work with that. Like, tell me more. And then, you know, as the people you network with, staffing firms, etc., they will filter that and think of all their clients and their network partners and be able to filter that back. Those opportunities are going to come and you know, allow you to get up that kind of runway a little quicker. Finding work, It's like one of my favorite cartoons ever. I don't know if you can see it. It says hunting school on the rock. Have you considered a career in gathering? But rolling through finding work, the best way I can think of this is trust. It's all trusted advisor, friends, family, maybe not for the work thing, but personal connections, alumni networks, ex-colleagues, former service providers. There are a bajillion bankers and insurance and those kinds of service providers that want nothing more than to help you and get you in your next opportunity. Probably to ask about their insurance and banking, but also they're very, the right guys are altruistic and they want to help out, networking you in. Agencies, so I was saying that, like for us, if you're starting your career and you want to do a gig, finding the right agencies to go rep you in the market. I advise, there's lots of me out there, our firms, I say go meet 5, know what you want, go into these firms, interview them, see, hey, are you going to hunt for me? Are you going to bring me opportunity that I want to do? Or am I just going to be another guy that you're trying to jam into all these weird holes and, the feelings might not be so fun over time. And whittle that down to 2 or 3. And then you have, all our circles and the opportunities we're working on, they're not perfectly overlapped. It'll broaden out your opportunities in the market. And you'll be able to kind of, again, build your portfolio as you continue to do your gig career. And once you do good work for one and the word gets out, like you're a hot commodity as well. So, being in the right firms, doing good work, people want to work with you. A digital marketplace for your skill set. Again, I think that's evolving. Toying around, looking at Aparo, looking at even Upwork, they have bookkeeper things. The pay is outrageously low, but hey, if you want to give it a shot and see what's going on, you can do that. The consulting firm angle is interesting. I know it's not necessarily gig. I do compete against firms that salary their consultants. The challenge with salary roles is that you give up your flexibility and maybe your variety. You may get niched and have to go, if you live in Schaumburg and now you got to go to Gurnee for a job, and you're like, I want to drive this forever, it's the winter or whatever. So you give up a couple of those things, but you kind of can relax and get your paycheck. The solution to this, in my opinion, is to find a really niched firm the best you can. Like if there's somebody really great at solving the problem that you love solving, really go all in on them instead of just being part of a broad pool for that. This is just a way when I'm interviewing folks and meeting with people, you're training me. So, what muscles, I'm thinking about this, I'll ask this, what muscles do you like to flex? So, and I'm internally digesting this, is this something I can hunt for you? Or should I better connect you? I know a lot of guys and gals in FEI are very, very high level successful. In CFO of the year, I know Tatum is a big sponsor. I push people to Tatum all the time. Because I'm like, look, if you really want to eat, you should know Chris Carney. And if you don't, I don't know how to connect with him, but you can figure it out. And he's a great guy to go hunt for you in the market. Do I want to work with you? Yes. Am I going to feed you as much as you want? I can't say a firm yes to that, so I want to advise you on where to go. So I'm always listening about that. Telling me stories about problems you solved. I'm learning stories are a huge currency in sales and things. Like I'm out in the, telling clients, here's what Bob did here, and this is the kind of problems you can solve. So I'm learning how to hunt for you, getting a sense of how you communicate. Compensation expectations, again, kind of the market dictates rates, after 7 years have a pretty good sense on if you're trying to make you're a month-end close guy and you're trying to make $250,000 a year. That's going to be a tough thing to do, and explaining to you why that is. It's not necessarily a compensation study. It's more of just the market dictates this, and I have market knowledge and can help communicate that to you. So takeaways: you must understand that current value, your present value, to use a finance term. The other side of Harmer, right when I came in, I was like, oh, this is going to be fish in a barrel. I know so many people that are finance and accounting, they're great. I'm going to just place people left, right, and center. It's going to be awesome. And then 6 months in, I was like, this isn't so easy. And I realized that a lot of the clients are very focused on future value of, hey, I want to bring this person in and I want to mold them and build them into my company, and they're to put them on this track. my clients are calling me with like, I need the present value of somebody. I need somebody, again, my tax director quit. I had I was having breakfast yesterday, 2 financial analysts left, and their sales are up, so they have this pricing workload that's coming down on them. They need to quote faster. They need people yesterday. So, who can solve that problem today is very much a present value opportunity. So thinking through that and really focusing on your value prop in that sense. Kind of a nuance here. This is part of my doctorate degree in anthropology. If you are working through agencies, be mindful of how they represent your brand, and also be mindful of their ownership structure. Private equity-backed staffing firms are like pounded on margin, metric. It'll have a very different feel than a privately held company that doesn't necessarily have those. Publicly traded ones, they have the quarterly earnings. They might, have to make a certain amount of calls, or so. It's a subtle nuance where I'm in a fortunate position where privately held, we can say no, we can take a very low margin just to break into an account, we can pay more to a consultant. It's a different dynamic, just something to be aware of. And then again, trust is an enormous asset in business development. You're thinking really hard about, who do my ultimate buyer trust, and how can I either leverage, like Harmer has a certain level of trust with clients in the market, and by working with us, you are leveraging that trust. I had a example being, I have a client, they sold a big part of their business, and they are buying multiple businesses nationally. The CFO I'd worked with at another company, and he called me and said, hey, I need like a plant controller to go out to these locations, and when we buy them, help get them integrated. And I had known him for probably 5 or 6 years. I knew the consultant that would work, who was available for 5 or 6 years, and the whole deal closed like when I was driving home from the city in an hour. That speed that it can happen is super quick, and the trust that I have in the consultant, and he has in us and the firm, and any ways you can hack the trust path to like build up your brand, I think is important to think about. So again, trust is an enormous asset in business development. So here wrapping up, employment landscape changing. Over the next 5 years, stats are saying gig economy is going to continue to rock this professional segment. I think there'll be more focus on it. I can say that. How it grows is to be seen, depending on technology and things like that. But if you're going to consider this professional gig-focused career, like understand your current value. Really adjust your profile, your pitch, everything to really focus on that. You can outsource tasks you don't like. Example being business development. Guys like me will hunt for you. There are folks out there that love doing it themselves. That's cool too. But if you like business development and like the networking, there are consultants out there that thrive, and I want to work with them so bad, but they're so connected that it's like they always get their next gig through an old banker buddy or a FEI colleague or whatever it is. There's various ways to do this. But focus on that work that brings you joy and engages you fully. And I think that's kind of the idea of the pro-gig economy, the broader gig economy. So there's me. Here's all the studies again that I kind of like ripped through very quickly. It's like a stack of paper like that. But I'll send this to anybody if you'd like to read more. These are kind of a select few of them. Yes. All right.
Okay, Roger, for people to leave their business cards, if we attach the presentation to that email when I send it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, happy to do that.
I
know I just, again, threw a lot at you. I could probably talk for days. Is this all making sense? You guys, it's kind of should feel very familiar to like, it's like staffing, it's temp, it's this, I think that's kind of the point is this is something that's existed a long time, and there's a big opportunity for people that are really good problem solvers to step into this void and help clients solve these problems. So. Yes, Jerry.
So, two questions. One is I haven't heard you, but also maybe in the marketplace talk about fractional CFOs, controllers. I didn't know where that fit in here. Yeah. And then the second question is, as a professional gig person, is there a hierarchy of what you want to call yourself a gig? Or is it more you're a professional, or does it make too much difference? I mean, you were saying that there's some biases for and against, what did you say, temp, interim, gig, and so forth.
Yeah, I call you Jerry. I kind of joke about that with clients. I'm like, this is, but depending on the client, like some companies just stink at how they treat, consultants. I call yourself a consultant, I think. It would be a good term. I think the fractional thing, I think it's super interesting. I've been networked with the B2B CFO guys. I understand. I have other friends that started firms that do kind of the same thing, but they're more COO, fractional COOs. They tend to focus on the smaller side of the market, like under, call it 50 million in revenue, where I don't necessarily, and I think Paro is a similar way. They kind of play in a lower level. I think they're trying to come up middle market, but I think the fractional thing's great. There's a lot, as the size of the company comes down, the challenges change dramatically in the amount of impact that you guys could have on these small businesses that maybe never had a CFO, or, I think it's tremendous. I think a challenge that you guys may have with that is pricing, because everybody freaks out about that. $150, what? You're nuts. Like, I'm not going to pay that. So ways to think about how that ROI that they get for that, ways to, it's not sell them per se, but just like helping them understand, hey, if you have such a hassle with your banks, I can come in and clean this up in a week or two and get you back on good terms with your bank, and how much would that save you? They're very like ROI minded in my experience. But I do think, again, that's totally part of the gig economy, I think. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
Just a comment to Jerry. So we would encourage people, if you're in an interim job like that or a gig, is to actually label it as fractional CFO or fractional role and show your accomplishments or your value proposition, those deliverables. I think people get that fractional term.
Yeah. It's an interesting space.
Yeah.
More and more, I meet with a lot of like management consultants that are doing this. They're leaving, McKinsey, or I'm going to do this on my own and charge half. And they will, pull together teams, a fractional CFO, fractional COO, and go to market with clients to deliver that similar experience. But I think, there's stuff bubbling there for sure. And again, I think it comes back. So one thing to think about is clients. You've probably heard this, like you never get fired for hiring IBM. So like there's a lot of this risk mitigation that goes on with, like, for us, it's like, could we help you go public? Or, I had a Northern Trust, this is back in the day, I used to do work for them when I was at Ernst & Young. They were like, we got Basel III coming out. You have somebody for 2 weeks a month that can advise us on best practices? I'm like, Mark, no, you need to call, this is why you call Ernst & Young, because like when your boss comes down and they're like, who did you work with? Rogers firm? Like, no, like, you're gone. Like, Ernst & Young told us to do this, So I think back to like, there's that whole risk mitigation. Yes, exactly. So that's back to like your brand and building your brand in the market. Then you're known as like Jerry kicks ass in fractional CFO environments. Like, you got to meet them. Those guys talk, and that can create a nice little pocket of opportunity. Does it make sense? Yeah. Any other questions?
Good.
I'm happy to, if you guys think of something, I like doing this, so.